He walked in like he already owned the place, didn't glance left or right, didn't slow his stride, just pushed through the front doors in an expensive suit and headed straight for the upstairs offices, like the rest of us were furniture. No hello, no introductions, no attempt to acknowledge the floor that actually kept the depot alive. Just a quick, dismissive nod to the receptionist and he was gone. I stood in the doorway of my cramped office near the loading bays, wiping grease off my hands with a rag that should have been retired years ago, and felt it immediately. The air shifted. The big warehouse doors were cracked open for circulation, engines idling, metal clanking, but the mood changed the second he arrived. New guy. Another one. My name is Dana. I'm 53 years old, senior mechanic at the Northeast Regional Transport Depot in Scranton, Pennsylvania. I've been here 21 years, long enough to watch 3 directors come and go, each one swearing they had the answer before burning out or getting transferred. This one was Brendan Clark, regional director. Corporate had sent out a polished email the week before with his photo and a neat list of accomplishments. Yale MBA, turned around struggling branches, drives transformation with metrics-based outcomes. None of that meant a damned thing on a concrete floor full of aging rigs and overworked people. Word spread fast that he was on site. Forklifts kept moving, engines kept humming, but everyone was paying attention. Guys pretended not to stare, but you could feel it. These people always showed up the same way, like they were here to fix us, like this place wasn't being held together by duct tape, caffeine, and people who knew the difference between theory and reality. By lunch, the break room was buzzing with low sarcasm. Joe from dispatch cracked something about Brendan probably running a PowerPoint on why wrenches were outdated technology. A few guys laughed. I did too, but I stayed alert. Men like Brendan didn't joke. They smiled while they sharpened knives. I ate my sandwich at my desk like I always did, facing the garage bays, watching the sunlight hit trucks that barely squeaked past DOT compliance. Somebody had to keep those trucks moving, and that somebody was me and a handful of others who knew every weld, every rattle, every problem by heart. Around 2 o'clock, Brendan walked past my office, didn't stop, didn't speak, just gave my name tag a quick scan, the way you'd check a barcode, then kept going. That was all I needed. I'd seen his type before. Polished talkers who learned logistics from a book and thought that made them prophets. They cut costs, reshuffle titles, squeeze out the veterans, and when the numbers start bleeding, they disappear into another role with a bigger bonus. So when he looked at me like a replaceable part, I didn't smile, didn't nod. I watched. You could feel a storm coming in your teeth. Over the next few days, the depot went quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. The machines still ran, the traffic still flowed. It was the people that changed. Conversations died when Brendan walked by. Laughter thinned out. Everyone started watching their backs. Meetings popped up behind closed doors, not once or twice, but constantly. Brendan pulled in the depot manager, senior ops, even IT. None of them came back saying a word. I asked Jamie, one of the floor leads I trusted, what was going on. He shrugged and said it felt like we didn't matter anymore. He wasn't wrong. Then the cuts started. Harris from routing was first, 15 years in, trained me back when vendor calendars were still handwritten. One morning, his badge didn't open the gate. 2 days later, Allison from procurement vanished. No announcement, no goodbye. I only knew because a kid with slick hair and a button-down was suddenly sitting at her desk like he belonged there. The replacements came with fancy titles: logistics optimization analyst, supply flow consultant. One of them couldn't even work the depot radio. I kept my mouth shut and did my job. Clocked in, ran diagnostics, chased parts, updated logs. I let the mess swirl without stepping into it because I knew the pattern. Brendan wasn't trying to learn the place. He was dismantling it to rebuild something that looked good on a report. The worst part was watching real problems get mishandled. A reefer went down near the I-84 ramp. Compressor failure. Harris would have handled it in minutes. Instead, one of Brendan's guys panicked, called a third-party vendor who didn't even service our fleet. 12 pallets of produce ruined. No accountability, just excuses and charts. Then came the mandatory depot-wide meetings every Wednesday. Brendan stood up front like he was hosting a seminar. Projectors, graphs, buzzwords. I'd seen this before. Strip out experience, replace it with cost-efficient ideas, and hope nobody notices until it's too late. I wasn't about to shout into the void. I stayed sharp, stayed quiet, and kept my ears open. That's how you survive. Thursday morning, 5 minutes into the briefing, he made his move. Brendan paused his slideshow and looked straight at me. "Dana," he said, like my name had just popped up on a screen, "can you explain your day-to-day responsibilities?" I didn't flinch. I laid it out calm and clean. Vendor coordination, preventative maintenance, DOT compliance, turnaround tracking. He nodded like I was listing office supplies. "So mostly logs and scheduling." I added, "hands-on diagnostics and dispute resolution." He smiled tight, mentioned new software, new vendors, eliminating manual oversight, then moved on. A drive-by hit. The room stayed silent. I knew exactly what it meant. When Streamline starts pointing at you, your desk's already half gone. After the meeting, the Outlook invite hit. HR. No agenda. I accepted without hesitation. Spent the next hour closing loops, finishing reports. At 10:28, I walked upstairs. HR was there with Brendan, blinds drawn, folder on the table. He thanked me for my service, said it wasn't about performance, said my role was being phased out. Severance, 60 days of benefits. I didn't react, asked if there was anything else. There wasn't. I stood up and left. I stepped off the elevator with the severance folder tucked under one arm, same way you'd carry a lunchbox on your last day of school. No goodbyes, no deep breaths, just walked. The floor was quiet, phones still ringing, machines still buzzing in the distance, but everything else held still. HR didn't follow. They didn't have to. Their part was done. I passed Jamie from payroll in the hallway. She saw me, then suddenly found something real interesting on the floor. Mike from intake looked up, started to open his mouth, then looked back down at his clipboard like I was smoke. Fine. I hit the front door with steady steps, no glance back, just pushed it open and let the thick, humid air hit me like a wall. By the time I reached my car, the sky cracked. Not a storm yet, just that ugly drizzle that soaks through your shirt without cooling anything. I unlocked the driver's side, tossed the folder onto the passenger seat, and sat there, hands on the wheel. Didn't cry, didn't yell, just sat. Brendan didn't get it, that much was clear. He didn't notice anything. Nothing flashy, nothing fake, just functional. I like that. The receptionist greeted me with a real smile, not the HR told me to be polite kind, just normal. She offered coffee, pointed me to a seat, and within 5 minutes a man named Carlos came out to get me, said he was the fleet operations lead. "Appreciate you coming in, Dana," he said, shaking my hand firm. "We've heard good things." "Let's hope they're true," I said back, and he laughed. The interview wasn't corporate. It was real. Carlos brought in 2 others, Sarah from procurement and Ed, their head tech, and we sat around a scratched-up conference table with printouts, not laptops. They asked real questions. How would I handle a double-rig axle issue with a time-sensitive load? What vendors had I worked with long-term, and why did I stick with them? What's my approach to preventative scheduling during winter surge months? No buzzwords, no condescending tone, just people who knew the grind and wanted someone who wouldn't screw it up. I gave them the truth, talked through diagnostics I'd run, budget fights I'd won, vendor disasters I'd avoided by checking a bolt pattern myself. They nodded, took notes. Ed leaned in when I mentioned my part recall tracking spreadsheet. Sarah actually asked for a copy. "Honestly," Carlos said after about 40 minutes, "we're not looking for someone to restructure the process. We're looking for someone who knows what the hell they're doing and can earn a supplier's trust." I said, "Then I'm probably what you need." Before I even got home, I had a voicemail. By Monday evening, the full offer came in. It beat my old salary by nearly 15 grand a year. Full control of the fleet repair budget. Title, Senior Fleet Maintenance Coordinator. No fluff, no padding, just what I'd earned. I accepted by 10 that night. Across town, the cracks were already showing. A former coworker, Manny, one of the techs still holding things together over at Brendan's depot, texted me. They can't keep up. New vendor missed 2 pickups and sent the wrong engine for a box truck. I didn't answer, just leaned back, poured another cup of coffee, and opened my laptop to review the new FMCSA inspection updates for diesel fleets. I heard the next part from Jaime, who still called when he was pissed off. He's been calling you a legacy blocker, Jaime said. Says the old guard slowed progress and now we're on the right track. I laughed into the phone. Legacy blocker, I repeated. That's what he's going with? Yep, he said. You held things together with Band-Aid solutions. He's going to learn real soon what happens when you rip off the Band-Aid and forget to check for infection, I said. The truth was, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to prove him wrong. All I needed was a phone that still rang with people who knew the value of experience, and that's exactly what I had. My inbox was already filling with parts catalogs and vendor contacts from Stonebridge's network. They trusted me to make the calls. No approval chains, no red tape, just do the job. So I did, while Brendan's depot spun itself in circles trying to replace what they never understood. I was setting up preventative schedules, reviewing tire rotation intervals, and drafting up a supply agreement Stonebridge had been trying to land for 6 months. And I wasn't done, not even close. By midweek, I was neck-deep in vendor calls at Stonebridge when my phone buzzed with a text from an old dispatcher at the depot. Big meeting today, Clark's sweating. I didn't reply, just smiled a little and kept working. That meeting wasn't just any check-in. It was the quarterly vendor review with Quan Freight Systems, a $12 million partnership that kept half of Brendan's fleet on the road. I'd handled every winter renewal since Quan joined the roster. The man didn't do small talk, didn't tolerate spin, and sure as hell didn't forget who fixed his problems when trucks froze up on I-80 last December. That morning, Brendan walked into the glass conference room like a man trying to fake confidence. Suit crisp, hair perfect, hands shaking under the table. Across from him sat Mr. Quan and 2 of his operations leads. All business, no smiles. Quan flipped open a folder and got right to it. We've had repeated delivery delays. Engine failure reports have doubled. Your new vendor hasn't met the service response times stated in your own contract. Brendan cleared his throat. We're in transition. The legacy team left behind some inefficient systems. We're correcting those. Quan didn't even blink. Who's managing vendor-side maintenance now? Brendan's eyes flicked down. That's internal. We've moved to software tracking and a third-party vendor partnership. Quan leaned back, unimpressed. Who's handling escalation? Who do my drivers call when a truck goes down at 2 a.m.? Brendan hesitated, then said, Our vendor hotline. It's centralized. Quan's expression hardened. He closed the folder and said flatly, No, I want to talk to Dana. She handled this before. The room went silent. Brendan forced a smile. Dana doesn't work here anymore. Quan's tone changed on the spot. Then you've made a mistake. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. She was the only reason we kept this contract alive through last winter. Brendan started babbling. Mr. Quan, we value this partnership, and I assure you... But the door was already opening. Quan's team followed him out. Calm, deliberate, done. No handshake, no agreement, just gone. By the time Brendan realized what had happened, word was already leaking through the building. Departments whispered, Slack channels blew up. Everyone knew the biggest contract on the books just walked. He tried damage control, claimed Quan's expectations were unrealistic, that the market shifting, that it was a mutual parting, but nobody bought it. You can't spend $12 million disappearing overnight. Back at Stonebridge, I was reviewing maintenance logs when my phone buzzed again. A text from Manny, one of the techs still holding down the shop floor. They're screwed. That was it. 2 words, no punctuation. Didn't need any. I leaned back in my chair, coffee cup warm in my hand, and looked out the small office window. The Stonebridge lot was busy. Rigs moving, drivers joking, people who actually liked showing up. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, balanced, because this was exactly how it had to go. You can't fake respect for the work. You can't plug in some shiny new system and expect trust to follow. I'd built those relationships bolt by bolt, mile by mile. Brendan thought he could replace that with software. Now he was finding out what happens when you delete the one person who knew how to keep your machine running. And I didn't lift a finger. My phone rang just after lunch on Wednesday. Unknown number. I let it buzz twice before I picked up. Hello? A pause, then that voice. Dana. Hey, it's Brendan Clark. I stood at my window, watching one of the Stonebridge drivers back into the dock like a pro. I didn't say anything, let him flail. I hope this isn't a bad time, he said, forcing a light chuckle. I wanted to, see if you'd be open to a conversation. Maybe some flexible consulting. Nothing formal. Just thought you might want to stay involved, maybe lend a hand while we stabilize things. I could practically hear him sweating. I see, I said, short and flat. We'd compensate fairly, of course, he added quickly. No titles, no obligations, just quiet help. You know, the systems, the vendors, the people. We think it would really help the transition. I waited a beat. I waited. Where and when? He jumped at it. How about Friday morning? Your office, Stonebridge, right? I'll come to you. Fine, I said, 10 sharp. Perfect. Thank you, Dana. Really, this means a lot. I hung up without another word. That night, I laid out my clothes. Clean slacks, blouse, no colors that draw attention. Simple flats, pulled my hair back tight, no makeup, no emotion. Friday, I was at my desk by 8. I reviewed a supply proposal, signed off on a diagnostics upgrade, and made 2 calls before he showed. Late, of course, 10:15. He came in with that practiced smile, trying to look in control. He wasn't. The sweat stain creeping down his collar told me everything. Appreciate you seeing me, he said, shaking my hand like we hadn't stood in a room weeks ago while he eliminated my job. I gestured to the chair across from me. Let's not waste time. He nodded, sat, leaned forward like this was a team huddle. Look, things moved fast. We underestimated some realities. I think we both know the depot's not running like it should, but with your insight, we can turn it around quietly together. I didn't smile, didn't nod, just let him talk. We don't need to formalize anything. We'll give you access to the systems, vendor lines, whatever you need. Just help us steer the ship until we're back on track. His voice dropped like he was offering some grand secret. I crossed my legs and looked him straight in the eye. I'll consider helping. He looked relieved, like he'd just dodged a bullet. Great, great. I knew you were reasonable about all this. But he didn't ask what my terms were, didn't ask who I'd already spoken to, didn't ask what I'd want in return, and that was the biggest mistake he could have made. I walked back into the depot on Monday morning and nobody said a word. No welcome, no handshake, no fake HR grin, just a temporary badge, a key card, and a cold nod from a nervous assistant who led me to a borrowed office with no nameplate. 4 walls, 1 desk, and a view of the dumpster behind the loading docks. That was fine. I didn't come back for the view. I sat my coffee down, opened the laptop they issued me, and logged in. Full access, maintenance logs, vendor records, scheduling systems, fleet diagnostics, all of it live and unlocked. Brendan had kept his word. Fool thought giving me the keys meant I'd keep the engine running for him. He still thought this was a favor. While his team scrambled to clean up his mistakes, I got to work. First thing I did was open my private contact list and scroll to Kwan's number, not his office line, his cell. We'd been through too many breakdowns in too many snowstorms not to keep it personal. I stepped outside, walked past the freight dock like I still belonged there, and called. Kwan, I said when he picked up, switching straight to Mandarin. I owe you an apology. He was quiet for a second, then said, You left without warning. That wasn't like you. It wasn't my choice, I said. Brendan removed me before I could explain anything. He thought software could replace what you do, he said flatly. He didn't understand the people, I told him. Didn't ask, didn't listen.
There was a pause, then a long exhale. I'm already looking elsewhere. I let that hang a beat, then said, Stonebridge won't waste your time. They actually care about uptime, not PowerPoints. He didn't answer right away, but I could tell he was weighing it. I'll set up an introduction, I said quietly. If it's not a fit, no pressure. He replied in English this time, if you vouch for them, I'll take the call. I hung up and typed out a quick message to Sarah at Stonebridge, kept it simple. High-value lead, trust-based referral. Asked her to handle it personally, low visibility. She replied 5 minutes later with one word, done. Meanwhile, inside the depot, Brendan was fumbling through back-to-back calls, trying to patch together what he thought was rebuilding trust. His voice echoed down the hall when he raised it. I heard him say, we've corrected those vendor lapses, and the transition is almost complete. It wasn't. His new vendor was still 3 service calls behind and had no cold chain fleet knowledge. Techs were rerouting trucks manually because the systems were glitching. I passed by one guy in a Stonebridge jacket who whispered to another, why is she even back? Let them wonder. Brendan walked by my borrowed office around 2, paused like he might say something, then kept moving. He looked tired, not just worn down, cornered. He thought this little deal bought him cover. It didn't. I didn't ask for a title, and he never offered one. But I made calls, I checked systems, I noted everything that was about to fall apart, not to help him, but to understand exactly what I'd be walking away from, one piece at a time, because this wasn't a rescue, this was reconnaissance. I wasn't here to fix what he broke, I was here to hand the right tools to the people who would replace him. The unraveling started slow. First was a regional produce supplier out of Allentown. They backed out of a 2-year transport deal. Brendan blamed seasonal restructuring, but I saw the email. They cited delayed deliveries, rising maintenance incidents, and zero confidence from depot management. A few days later, a mid-size beverage distributor sent a termination notice. Same story, missed pickups, failed reefer units, zero confidence. Brendan tried to hold his posture, claimed the market was correcting, said competitors were undercutting them. But in the war room meetings, his voice got tighter, his answers thinner. He stopped looking people in the eye, and I didn't say a damn thing. Just sat in my borrowed office, typing reports no one asked for, monitoring logs no one read, and waiting. Meanwhile, Stonebridge was moving fast. That second contract handoff happened Thursday morning. Quiet deal, no press, just one longtime vendor I'd worked with who got sick of Brendan's excuses and asked if I knew anyone else. I gave them a name, made the intro, stepped back. By the time the deal was signed, Stonebridge had taken over nearly $4 million in annual transport business. Brendan never even saw the play. He just got the notice, then spent an hour in his office yelling at someone over Zoom. I heard from one of his assistants the next day. A kid named Drew knocked on my door, eyes darting behind him. Hey Dana, a quick question. Do you know why Allentown Freight pulled their volume? I looked up from my laptop. I don't manage their account. He shifted on his feet. Right, yeah, I just figured maybe you had insight. I gave a polite shrug. Maybe ask Brendan. They started coming more often after that. Little knocks, little questions. Hey, do you know if we have backup vendors for reefer units? Did you ever use a mechanic named Oscar down in Harrisburg? I answered each one just vague enough to keep them guessing. And Brendan, he still hadn't figured out what was really happening. So I scheduled the meeting. Same room where he fired me, same blinds half drawn, same folder layout, same awkward conference table. He walked in 5 minutes late. No jacket, just a coffee he didn't touch. He didn't even fake a smile this time. I didn't wait for him to speak. This is over, I said. He blinked. Excuse me. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. You've lost 3 contracts in 2 weeks. You're about to lose 2 more. Partners are walking, vendors are disengaging, your own staff is bypassing you for information they think I might still have. He tried to cut in. Okay, first of all, don't. I snapped. Don't interrupt me. Not here. He sat back, stunned, quiet. You walked in thinking you could run a depot off bullet points and bar graphs.
You fired people who knew how to hold the place together. You replaced experience with flash. You thought trust was a line item on a spreadsheet. I let the silence sit heavy for a beat. Then I laid it flat. You didn't just screw up. You dismantled something that took years to build. And now the only reason anyone still answers your calls is because I haven't told them to stop yet. He looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. You set this up? No, I said. You did. I just let it play out. He opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. I stood, gathered my things. We're done, I said, and walked out the same door he once watched me disappear through. Only this time, it was his turn to be left behind. I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice, didn't turn back to look at him sitting there, jaw clenched and hands twitching like he might finally say the right thing. He didn't. I walked out slow, steady, head high. My steps echoed down the hallway, the same floor I used to mop grease off when I was 29 and brand new to the job. People glanced up as I passed, but no one said a word. They all felt it, the shift. The silence behind me was louder than any shouting match could have been. Brendan stayed in that conference room like someone had yanked the battery out of his chest, just sat there watching the doors close, realizing way too late what he'd lost. I hit the parking lot without pausing, keys already in hand. The sky was gray, wind picking up, the kind that hints at a storm but holds it just out of reach. I liked it that way. By the time I pulled into Stonebridge's lot, it was business as usual. Rigs lined up for inspections, dock workers moving crates like clockwork. Inside, my office smelled like fresh paper and coffee. I sat down, took a sip from the mug waiting on my desk, and picked up the phone. Yeah, I said, flipping through my notes. Let's go ahead and greenlight that diagnostics batch. Get it moving today. The guy on the other end confirmed. I hung up. No drama, no fireworks, just another job done, right? I didn't scream, I didn't sabotage. I just waited. Waited for him to build his little empire out of cheap parts and buzzwords. Waited for him to swing the axe, thinking he was cutting dead weight. All I had to do was show them what real competence looks like when it walks away, and this time nobody forgot my name. If you liked it, please like, comment, and show your appreciation.